What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Week 6 is already here, so we really need to be thinking about trading more. We know a lot about teams right now, and we have a pretty good idea of who the most valuable players are right now and who will be for the rest of the season. And since the majority of people watching these videos have really deep benches, that's something that you need to be taking advantage of, packaging those players with starters to get upgrades. So we'll go over 9 individual players in 2 groups that we should be trading for today, this week. And it kind of depends on, like we went over last week, how good your team is. Remember, I have the free power rankings tool on the website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. Fill that out every week. Figure out how good your team is, figure out what bucket you fall into, and that kind of gives you an indication of what types of players you should be trading for. So with that, let's go over our first group of players, which would be my top recommendations for teams that are closer to like win now mode. I would say that there's actually very few players this week. It's only going to be 2 names out of the 9 total. I believe it's 9 total. Don't quote me on that. I guess we'll see in the video. But it's only 2 of the names that are more like longer term plays, players who, if you need to win this week, you probably shouldn't trade for this week. So this first list is kind of for everyone, but I would say stick to the first list if you got to win right now. But those players are Christian McCaffrey, Jamar Chase, Travis Etienne, Michael Pittman Jr., Ken Walker, and Romeo Doubs. And that's like roughly ordered by how difficult I think it would be to trade for them. Maybe you could switch around a little bit, but I think that order is pretty good indication of like, you know, how hard they'll be to trade for right now. Obviously, McCaffrey, Jamar Chase, they're going to cost you a lot to acquire them. There's no such thing as buying low on these 2 players and being like, wow, you know, I just traded Jacoby Myers for Christian McCaffrey. That's not happening. You're still going to have to give up a ton. But I'm still very, very bullish on both of them long term. McCaffrey has the unknown, I guess, of the coaching change. He's transitioning into PJ Walker at quarterback. Who knows who his quarterback's going to be every single week? But let's be honest, nothing could be worse than Baker was, and their play calling was putrid. So there's no guarantee it's going to be better. Like, he could still be just as bad, and the Panthers could still be really bad, but there's no way it's going to be worse. So I don't think there's a ton of risk in these changes. If anything, there is at least some hope that the play improves for the Panthers. They have really just been like the definition of a dumpster fire this season. And, you know, there's really just nowhere to go but up for McCaffrey's value. There's also the like slight possibility, I don't think it's going to happen, but it at least remains possible that the Panthers trade McCaffrey. If they go into full tank mode, you know, it would just be smart for them if they're doing a true rebuild to maybe not have like the one great player that can just win the game on their own and also be carrying his contract. If they want to go full tank, they want to rebuild, it doesn't make sense to be paying a running back a ton of money. Now, I don't really know how many teams would like, you know, give them a ton of draft capital given that they would need to acquire McCaffrey's contract, but there are absolutely Super Bowl contenders out there that would want him. And if, again, small percent chance, but if that happens and he goes to Super Bowl contender, I mean, he's by far the most valuable player in all of fantasy, and anyone who'd acquired him is like, oh my goodness, my Super Bowl odds just doubled. So it remains, again, a small possibility, but that at least increases value because it is still possible. Then with Chase, I know he's been bad. It's really just because defenses are taking away him because he's clearly their best player, and deep shots, and they're basically saying, okay, Cincy, can you run the ball? We're going to give you defensive coverages that are very clearly opening up holes for running backs. We are stopping the pass. We're stopping the deep passing. If you want us to stop doing this, run the ball. And Cincy's like, okay, we'll try, and then they fail every single game. So if they continue to be incapable of doing that, it's obviously going to hurt Chase because defenses aren't going to stop. Like, they're not going to be like, oh, wow, you know, they're averaging like 2 yards per carry. Let's stop double teaming Chase. Let's stop taking away the deep pass. That makes no sense. They're going to continue stopping those things, and letting them just be able to run it, but they just like can't. They can't figure out how to do that. Regardless, at some point, you have to think they still have a quality offensive line. You have to think at some point they're going to figure out how to run the ball. So that'll help. But then also, Chase still has a 28% target share on the season. He's one of the best prospects we've ever seen. And he's been very inefficient with his targets thus far. Like, he's not going to continue averaging 10.7 yards per reception all season. His catch rate of 60%. It's going to rise. Like, I think in week 1, we kind of saw his ceiling. I mean, that was a phenomenal game. He's not going to do that every week. But we've seen his floor for a few straight weeks now. And so it only takes one nuke from Ja'Marr Chase for the people who have him to remember, oh, yeah, he is capable of 10 for 150 and 2 touchdowns. Maybe I am actually, okay with these 12, 13-point performances if I have access to a 40-point ceiling. Well, that's why we want to trade for him. That's why he's a wide receiver 1 rest of season. I mean, I would be so happy if I had a deep team, the person who has Chase is willing to trade him, and I'd be like, okay, here's a great wide receiver 2, like a high-end wide receiver 2, and also here's a running back 2 to really help out your running back depth. If they're willing to go for a trade like that, again, you're not trading like Chase Edmonds and like some scrub wide receiver for Ja'Marr Chase. It's not going to happen. But trade your like third best wide receiver. Maybe you've got a wide receiver using the flex. Maybe your wide receiver 2. Just to get that second wide receiver 1, trade a really good wide receiver 2, a really good running back 2, both of those together. It is possible, especially if the team needs some depth, has had injuries at running back, which many of teams have had right now, or just busts at running back. Trying to find teams like that have Chase, trade for him. After those 2, I think you take a step down into the trio of Etienne, Pittman, and Ken Walker. All 3 should be like, I would say at least roughly equal difficulty in trading for. And it is likely you're going to need like multiple quality players, like multiple start-worthy players. I don't think you can say, oh, here's 2 high-end bench players for any of these guys. I don't think that's going to get done. But maybe 2, like if you have in like 2 flex leagues, something like that, or 2 players you've been consistently using in that flex spot for one of these players. Again, 2-for-1s are always better for the team getting the one player. If you can do something like that for these 2, or these 3 actually, then I would definitely do that. Who exactly you go after kind of depends on, I guess, who you prefer, but then also what do you need? Do you need running back? Do you need wide receiver? What's your team look like? What does their team look like? My lean this week would be Pittman. I just think, like, not saying he's the most valuable long term, just that I think it'll be easiest for you to get him compared to what his actual value is. He went off in week 1, but then missed week 2. He's been capped at 72 receiving yards in weeks 3, 4, and 5. Now we have Alec Pierce emerging as a reliable number 2. And so people who have Pittman are absolutely panicking, because I have heard plenty of people panicking about him, asking what they should do. But the Colts remain dead last at 13.8 points per game. That finish, like if they ended the season at that, would be the worst of any team since 2012. That is not going to hold. They're a better offense than they've shown so far. And I still view Pittman as a rock solid wide receiver 2 every week. And if anything, like Pierce emerging, you might think in your head that that's bad. It's going to take target share. Maybe it takes some target share away. Number 1, Pittman's the one. He's definitely better than Alec Pierce. He's going to be more targeted. Don't think that there's going to be like a flip here. That's not going to happen. But also, it at least gives defenses something to fear, and it at least gives like Matt Ryan another player that can get open so they can stop going 3 and out. It doesn't help Pittman if he's targeted twice on 1st and 2nd down and then they punt the ball, right? Like that doesn't help him. You want to stay on the field. You want to get into the red zone. You want to score a touchdown every once in a while. That's going to help Pittman. You've got Jonathan Taylor coming back. You've got Pierce emerging. Like the offense is going to be better, and that's going to help Pittman. Also, the Colts have like a late season bye. So again, if you're in win now mode, you don't want to maybe trade for someone who's got a bye this week or the next week. You're like, I need to win, 2 of the next 3 matchups. Well, he's got a late season bye. You'll have him for the short term. You'll have him for, a good chunk of the season until you've got, of course, in the late season. So if you need like a quality wide receiver, you've been missing that piece, I really think Pittman is a good person to go after this week. After that, I think it would be Ken Walker instead of ETN for me. I know it feels like you're trading at peak value for Walker because, I mean, you are. This is the highest his value has been. But it's at least possible that your league mates don't know exactly how to value him, don't know how valuable he is. But remember, I mean, I recommended spending 100% of your remaining fab to get him if he was on free agency this week. We talked all summer about how certain players, on average, maybe they don't do fantastic. Maybe they don't outperform their ADP. Maybe you're not using them. But if things go their way, they're league winners. That's Ken Walker, and it just went his way. Like, Penny's done for the season. They're not using Travis Homer, DJ Dallas ahead of him. You're going to have Ken Walker as, I don't want to say a feature running back because he's not going to be like heavily targeted, but getting all this workload on the ground, a ton of goal line. He was the number one like running back prospect on the ground. Like, I think Breece Hall, everyone kind of thought was the better overall prospect because Breece Hall was so much better in the receiving game. But in terms of pure running back talents, Ken Walker was number one. He's a phenomenal running back. He's going to get, 60, 70, at times 80% of the running back opportunities in a week. Like, if you can get him for running back 2 value, I think that's his floor this season. Like, I think worst case scenario, rest of season, you're playing him every week as running back 2. Best case scenario, he's a top 10 running back. And I don't think anyone's going to be asking top 10 running back value. So if you can get him for running back 2 value, if that's his floor, that's a really, really good trade. Then finally, as I said, ETN, he's seen his snap percentage rise in 4 straight weeks. He has continued to be efficient while James Robinson has been one of the least efficient running backs in the NFL. He just set a season high of 5 targets this last week, and it's only really a matter of time before he starts taking more and more work from Robinson. Unless Robinson starts to be more efficient, there's no way Jacksonville can be looking at these 2 running backs, looking at these games and being like, yeah, it makes sense we're giving Robinson all these touches. Like, he's been so bad besides like 2 or 3 plays this season. But when ETN gets the ball, he looks explosive and he's been really good. I think you'll be able to play him as a running back 2 rest of season. Maybe in the very, very, very short term, in the next 2 weeks, he's more of a flex. But I think that's totally fine if you're trading. You're like, Nick, I'm in win now mode. I can't think rest of season. I still think you can start ETN for the rest of the season. And if you can survive the next few weeks, I think his value just slowly grows a little bit more and more every week. And I don't think he's going to cost you that much because, like, he's had a few dud games. He hasn't scored yet. Like, people haven't seen it yet, but it's coming. So if you can get him pretty cheap, I think running back 2 is what he's going to be valued at rest of the season. The final buy low, if you're struggling right now, is Romeo Doubs. I think that he's by far the easiest to acquire among all the players I'll mention in this video, but the upside is still absolutely elite. He's coming off a 3 for 29 dud in London, but he's played at least 86% of the snaps in 3 straight weeks. He has a 17% target share on the season. All he needs to do really is get to like 20, 21% target share. So that's like, 3-4% more targets. He does that and he's like an every week start. I'm not 100% convinced. I kind of talked about last week. I was like, if he has another good game, he's in like the 20% for target share, we're going to be starting him every week. That didn't happen, but I think he can get there. And I think people are going to I think they're going to be like, oh man, I should have traded him after the 2 good games. I missed the top. And then they're going to see an offer and they're going to be like, okay, I'll do it, because they're going to, again, feel like they missed the top. Look at that dud game. That was probably one of the first times they're actually starting him because, no one started him in that first good game. Maybe they contemplated it and the next week against the Patriots, but maybe they saw 2 good weeks and they're like, yes, now I can start Doubs. And then he does nothing. And they're like, wow, this is just annoying to roster, easier to trade for him. So I think that at worst, he's a flex value moving forward, but I think the most likely outcome is that he's like a, mid to low end wide receiver 2, someone that you can just throw into wide receiver 2. He's going to have some weeks that are lower floor, but he could be the number 1 wide receiver on the Packers. He's still a rookie. Rookies break out in the second half of the season. There's a lot of upside here, and I don't think people are going to value him that high. So if you can package, 2 just quality players for him, I would definitely do that. For those of you who have been doing well, so ideally you do the power rankings tool, you're in that like top 3 or 4, and you've got a good record, you can afford to maybe take some chances. I would definitely go after Jonathan Taylor and DeAndre Swift. Taylor has been like the model of health through his football career. That doesn't mean he can't get hurt. That doesn't mean he can't have this ankle injury linger all season. Football is a dangerous sport. Running back is, the most dangerous position. It's the one most likely to get injured. But it seems like the most likely outcome is that he returns from this injury. He goes back to being his old self, and people wonder why they ever gave away Jonathan Taylor. I know it's been a slow start, but guess what? He did that last season too. I mean, he had 0 touchdowns and 0 games over 64 rushing yards through 3 weeks last year. He was running back 29 over that time, and people were not happy that they drafted him. Then he scored a touchdown in 11 straight games, averaged 5.9 yards per carry, 122 rushing yards per game, and was running back 1 by 59 points in that 11-game stretch after week 3. He's an absolute monster, and he's just been getting a little bit unlucky to start the season. But just like we talked about with Eckler 2 weeks ago, fantasy is very touchdown reliant. You can have a great workload. You can be getting the exact volume we thought we would see. That's what we saw with Eckler. We're like, listen, nothing is different. I know he's not producing in fantasy, but nothing is different from what we expected. It's only the touchdowns, which are random. Trade for him. It's the same thing with Jonathan Taylor. I mean, he's seeing a great workload. We know he's fantastic. He's just going to come back from this injury and score touchdowns. So if you have any ability to trade for him, absolutely do that. And it's the same thing with DeAndre Swift. He should be returning after their bye this week, but it's certainly possible that the team that has him is in win now mode, right? He gets injured 1 week, he's out the next week, he's on bye this week. Like, maybe someone who invested heavily in him is like, not doing so hot, because it's also kind of a part of the draft where maybe they paired him with Najee Harris, and it's like, oh no, if that kind of happened. So if that's the case, they need to win now. Use that to your advantage. It's not going to be easy trading for Swift, obviously, but if you're able to, you're locking up an explosive running back 1 on the team with like the worst defense in football. And also think about this Lions offense. Like, yeah, they're going to be the worst defense in football. They're probably going to allow like 35 points per game. So they're always going to have to play aggressive. They're going to get Ramon St. Brown back healthy. They're going to get Jameson Williams back relatively soon. DeAndre Swift back. I mean, they're going to be amongst the league leaders in points per game. Don't look back to last week and be like, oh, no, they scored 0 points. This Lions offense is like a dud. They're a fluke. They're frauds. Absolutely not. It's such a good offense, such a high ceiling. You'll want DeAndre Swift this season. The final thing I'll say with this one is that we need to understand that every year is different, right? What is unique about this season? How do you win this year? This season, the best rosters are going to have the top 3 quarterbacks or the top 2 tight ends, hopefully both. Kind of hard to have both, but if you can get both, oh my goodness, the ceiling is insane. But those are going to be the best teams. That's just how it is this season. There's not a whole lot you can do. If you put together a great roster, your quarterback scores 20, you're like, hey, I streamed a 20-point quarterback, and then Josh Allen drops 40 on you. Kelsey has 4 touchdowns. And you're like, well, I picked up the tight end on free agency that scored a touchdown, but I still lost that position by 20. It's difficult to kind of overcome those differences. That's why we were kind of in on some of these high-end tight ends. We were like, try and leave your draft with a high-end tight end, because if you can hit on that position, it's a wasteland behind that. That's what we're seeing with Kelsey Andrews. That's what we're seeing with Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, and Lamar Jackson. There's a cliff after those 5 players, like among those positions, obviously, and those 5 all rank inside the top 20 in my rest of season rankings. You should be doing everything in your power to just like acquire 1, hopefully 2 of those players. Again, that's asking a lot, but I know it sounds like impossible, and maybe it is for some of you. Maybe some of you look at this and you're like, nope, we've already been told by the people who have them they're not trading in this season. But I bring up these 5 for 2 reasons. First off, some of you have asked about trades that involve one of these players. Maybe it's like Josh Allen, trading them away for like 2 really good players that'll just like be depth for you. I just want to reiterate that these 5, Allen, Hurts, Lamar, Kelsey, Andrews, are true difference makers this season and should not be traded away. Unless someone is giving you like 2 running back ones, don't trade these players away. They're really big difference makers. You can figure out everything else. But second, because of number 1. If I'm getting all these questions, should I trade this person away? Should I sell high on Travis Kelsey? Well, if I'm getting a ton of those questions, that means there are people who are willing to trade them away. So it might be difficult, but I highly recommend at least seeing. Text the person who has them, message them in your chat, like do something to see, are they available to be traded for? And if it's possible, do everything in your power to gain that massive edge and get a deal done for what are the 5 true difference makers this season. So you can see my full rest of season rankings on my website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com, and the week 6 rankings are up as well for those of you who have not looked yet. I'll be back tomorrow with running back starts and sits, Friday with wide receiver starts and sits, and then Saturday to go over my favorite plays this week. That, my friends, is the end of this one. Hope you all did enjoy. If you did, how about hitting the like button, and how about subscribing to the channel if you're new here? Thanks for watching.